My name is Jim Morgan, the Blind Clockmaker. It's February 16th, 2024. I'm in my little shop in Fort Myers, Florida here, and I'm about to embark on what I am sure will be my most difficult project yet. I intend to make a copy of a violin made by Giuseppe Guarnerius in 1733. It is a model called a Chrysler, and I have ordered some patterns and forms that will duplicate that violin. And I don't know how it's going to come out, but Guarnerius is a contemporary of Stradivari and was just as famous back then, and has purportedly sold, or has a violin made by him sold for better than $16 million. So I'm going to try to duplicate that. If I get it as good as he did, you can buy it for about $14 million. I was able to meet a renowned violinist a few months ago, and he was playing a 1660 violin. And I got to talk to him, and I told him that I'd always had an ambition to build a violin, but it's too late now. I can't because I can't see. Well, the more I thought about it, when I go and talk to visually impaired people and other handicapped people, I always gave them the advice when they said, I can't do that, that I told them you can do more than you think you can, and much more than others think you can. If you've seen my videos and my news clips and so forth, you've heard me say that before. So when I got to thinking about it, here I was giving advice to people that I wouldn't take myself. So I decided, I'm going to try this. If it works out, fine. If it doesn't, I'm not going to say I couldn't do it. I'm just going to do my best. That's what I'm attempting to do. I know it's going to be extremely difficult. I've studied how the stuff is going together, and I have to come up with a way of doing it when you can't see what you're doing. And that's the challenge that I'm up for, and we will see how it goes. Okay, I'm ready to start the actual violin. I have been experimenting, methodizing, and practicing different operations to see how I'm going to make this thing happen. And I'm to the point now where I think I'm going to actually start the violin itself.
33 millimeters.
33 is exactly what I want. And one of the things I'm doing is I am changing from a flame maple or a curly maple or a bird's eye maple back and neck and scroll to a different kind of wood, and maybe the only violin that's going to be made from a piece of canary wood. Now I'm ready to start bending the ribs around the violin. And the way I bend it is with this right here, which is called a bending iron. But that's at around 500 degrees, so I can't touch it, and that's difficult for someone that can't see. So I put on the gloves just in case I barely touch into it. This is a bending strap. It helps to keep the curve more uniform and regular. I have to find the iron. I've got a piece of wet lining material here. If you ask me if I have ever burnt myself, I would say no. No more than about 50 times. So you know what they say, no pain, no gain. But in a luthier's case, a blind luthier, it'd be more likely to say no whining, no lining. Okay, I'm in the process of gluing the linings to the inside of the ribs here. We have switched venues. I started the violin process in Fort Myers, Florida, and now we have relocated for the summer to my shop in Hebron, Ohio. I'm at the point now to start what's called the front and back plates. Those are the two violin-shaped pieces of wood on the front and the back of the violin. Now the front is always made from a special kind of spruce. It is from Sitka, Alaska. It's a special type of spruce that has better tonal qualities than the spruce we get around here. So I am cutting what's called the purfling. It's a very, very tiny piece. I'm using wenge, which is a very dark wood, to match the ebony that I'm using for the fingerboard and the other parts of the violin. Now comes the job of bending, fitting, and trying to get it into that groove. And I thought about skipping this step, but I decided that only quitters would skip this hard step, and I'm not a quitter. So now it's time to start the actual hand carving of the top and back plates. Okay, now I have been carving on the front plate for a long time, probably 10 to 12 hours so far. I've got the outside pretty well done, and I'm working on the inside. And now I have to set the depth so that the thickness is the exact right thickness. As I'm carving, feel the bottom of that hole, and when I get to the bottom, then I know I'm that thick. And if I do that all over, that gives me a good indication about how thick this plate is becoming. So most of my carving is done with this little thumb plane. It's got a curved sole this way and this way, so that it can do a concave surface like this one. So I just keep working at that, checking my thickness until I get this plate about 2.6 to 2.8 millimeters thick, which is very thin. And this is a very time-consuming and difficult job. I don't know how many blind violin makers there are in the world, but after doing a lot of this work, I would venture to say you could probably count them on one finger. So I started building the neck and the scroll, and I started with just a piece of rectangular wood with parallel sides both directions. So I got my peg notch cut out, smoothed out. So the next step that I need to do to the scroll and the neck is I want to cut a recess, and I made the recess. I made two wedge-shaped pieces of wenge, 5 millimeters at the top, which is the thickness that the side walls of the peg box is supposed to be. So as you can see, I put that on there, and it's wedge shaped so that it counterbalances the wedge shape that is on the scroll here. So I drilled the 4 peg holes, and now I'm going to start doing a little more routing to the scroll. So now I'm working on one of the last parts of my top plate. I got to cut in 2 F holes here. So right now what I'm doing is I am reaming out the taper for the tuning pegs. The taper is a 30-to-1 taper. This is a peg hole reamer, and it's got that 30-to-1 taper on it. The next step, a very important step, is to make what's called the base bar. And the base bar is a strip of wood that goes on the underneath side of the top plate, right under the G string, it's the bass side. And what that does is it strengthens the top plate in that area. And we have placed the top plate where it goes, and we have it located with a couple pins here at each end. and we have clamped it all the way around. We have glued on the black plate and just finishing putting the clamps on right now. And before that, we glued the neck to the body. And now I'm ready to put two other small pieces on the violin. They are both made out of ebony, something extremely hard. The first one is called a saddle. That little piece right there, I've cut a notch here in the end of the violin, and that saddle gets glued in place right there like that. The other piece, also ebony, is called the nut, and the nut goes at the end of the fingerboard right here. I don't have the fingerboard on, but that will go right there, and that's a very important piece because that is where the strings go from the tailpiece over the bridge, over the nut, and then onto the tuning pegs. So that gets glued in place right there. We've got two strings installed. Before we did that, we had to put what's called the sound post. Here's an example of a sound post. It's just a little 5mm spruce dowel. That dowel goes underneath the bridge here, underneath this foot of the bridge, between the top plate and the back plate. It had to be cut for length and carved at the angles that the top and the back are carved at. Very difficult to get in there. Kathy had to put it in for me. And then it gets tightened up, and when you put the strings on, that brings that plate down even snugger to keep that in there, because it's not glued or anything, it just sits in there. And what that does is it transfers the sound from the front of the violin to the back. And it also supplies the support it needs underneath that bridge for when you tighten that string up to keep that top from caving in too much. The other thing that we bought is the tailpiece here. The tailpiece is what holds the strings at this end, and this is little string that goes around this end peg here is called a gut, and that just goes there. This thing just lays on there. It's not fastened either. The bridge isn't fastened. The sound post isn't fastened. Everything just gets tightened up with the strings, and we've got two more strings to put on, and we're ready to start playing Mozart. Okay, got my violin done. Now I'm just going to play a little Devil Went Down to Georgia for you. Sounds just like it, doesn't it?